You do not hold a hill when the enemy fires 100,000 artillery shells at it in 3 hours. This is not bravery. This is mathematics. This is physics. When that volume of high explosive impacts a single piece of terrain, when the bombardment is so intense that trees vanish, when the earth itself is excavated and rearranged, when the very altitude of the ground decreases from the sheer tonnage of metal falling on it, you do not stay. You retreat. You fall back to secondary positions. You preserve your force to fight another day. There is no shame in this. It is doctrine. It is common sense. It is what every military academy in the world teaches. Because holding ground against overwhelming firepower does not make you a hero. It makes you a casualty statistic. For 3,000 years, commanders have understood this truth. From the siege lines of ancient Carthage to the trenches of Verdun, the arithmetic of artillery has remained constant. Enough shells, properly applied, will break any defense. Always. The Italians knew this in March 1941. They had studied the same military histories. They had trained at the same academies. They understood that concentrated bombardment followed by massed assault would break defensive lines. And in March 1941, Italy needed a victory desperately. For 5 months, the Greeks had humiliated Mussolini's army. What was supposed to be a 3-week conquest had turned into a catastrophe. Greek forces had not only stopped the Italian invasion, they had driven Italian armies 30 to 80 kilometers back into Albania. Towns Italy had held for years were now in Greek hands. Italian divisions that had crossed into Greece in October 1940 were fleeing north by November. Mussolini's prestige lay in ruins. Hitler mocked him. The Italian people questioned him. His own generals doubted him. So Mussolini planned one final offensive, Operation Primavera, the spring offensive, Italy's last chance to defeat Greece before Germany invaded and took the credit. The plan was simple. Concentrate overwhelming force on a 6-kilometer front. 11 Italian divisions supported by armor and hundreds of aircraft. Break through the Greek lines. Recapture the town of Klissura. Drive to the Greek border. Restore Italian honor. At the center of this offensive stood a single hill, height 731 meters above sea level. Hill 731. The hill controlled the valley road to Klissura. Whoever held 731 controlled the entire defensive line. If the Italians took this hill, the Greek army would be encircled. The road to southern Greece would be open. The war would be over. Mussolini himself traveled to Albania to watch the offensive. He established an observation post on Mount Komarit, directly across from Hill 731. He brought his field glasses. He brought his personal staff. He intended to witness his army's triumph personally. The Italian plan allocated 16 days to break through Greek lines and reach the border. What the Italians did not know was that Hill 731 was defended by a Greek officer who had already proven that mathematics meant nothing when men decided not to run. His name was Major Dimitrios Kaslas, and 4 months earlier, on the banks of the Kalamas River at Elia Kalamas, Kaslas and 800 men of his battalion had held their positions against 42,000 Italians for 7 days. The Italians were about to learn that some men do not calculate odds before they fight. Major Dimitrios Kaslas is 39 years old in March 1941. Born in Puri, a village in the mountains of Magnesia, he has served in the Greek army since the early 1920s. He is a veteran of the Asia Minor campaign. He is a professional soldier who has spent 2 decades learning his trade. By March 1941, Kaslas commands the 2nd Battalion of the 5th Infantry Regiment, the 2/5 Battalion. Approximately 600 to 800 men, depending on casualties and reinforcements. Most of his soldiers come from Trikala and Karditsa, agricultural towns in Thessaly. Farmers, shepherds, men who know mountains, men who understand hardship. These are not elite troops. They are reservists, middle-aged men with families. Many are in their 30s and 40s. They carry bolt-action rifles. They have limited artillery support. Their uniforms are worn. Their boots are patched. But they have been fighting since October 1940. They have been winning since November. They know what Italian attacks look like, and they know they can be stopped. In early March, Greek High Command identifies Hill 731 as the critical defensive position in the Albanian front. Intelligence reports indicate massive Italian troop concentrations opposite the hill. Reconnaissance aircraft photograph Italian artillery parks containing hundreds of guns. Radio intercepts suggest a major offensive is imminent. On March 5th, at a conference in Athens, Greek commanders discuss defensive strategy. The consensus is grim. If Italy concentrates its full strength on a narrow front, the Greek lines will likely break. The Greeks are exhausted. They have been fighting in the Albanian mountains through a brutal winter. Supplies are limited. Reinforcements are sparse. Ammunition is rationed. But the order from Athens is clear. Hold as long as possible. Every day of delay gives Greece more time to mobilize reserves. Every Italian attack that fails buys time for British reinforcements to arrive. Hill 731 is assigned to the Greek 1st Division, part of 2nd Corps commanded by Major General Georgios Bakos. Within the 1st Division, the hill itself is held by Kaslas and his 2nd 5 Battalion. When Kaslas receives his orders, they are explicit. Defend Hill 731 at all costs. Do not retreat. Do not yield ground. The entire defensive line depends on this position. Kaslas understands what this means. It means his battalion will absorb the main Italian assault. It means casualties will be catastrophic. It means many of his men will not leave this hill alive. He gathers his officers. He explains the situation. The Italians are coming with everything they have. Armor, artillery, air support, 11 divisions against the Greek 2nd Corps' 5 divisions. One of his company commanders asks the question everyone is thinking: how long are we expected to hold? Kaslas's answer is simple: as long as it takes. He orders his men to dig deeper trenches, to build overhead cover against artillery, to camouflage their positions, to stockpile ammunition in multiple locations so that if one bunker is destroyed, others remain functional. He walks the defensive line personally. He checks fields of fire. He positions his 3 water-cooled Schwarzlos machine guns to cover the most likely approach routes. He establishes fallback positions so that if the forward trenches are overrun, defenders can retreat to secondary lines and continue fighting. And he issues an order to every man in the battalion, an order that will become famous in Greek military history. We will defend our positions to the last. No one will move backwards. You will encourage your men and maintain their morale. The enemy is preparing a massive attack, which we will block and destroy. I repeat, the enemy will only pass from our position when we all die over our positions. Think about what that order means. Think about the level of commitment it demands. There is no plan for retreat. There is no fallback line beyond the hill. There is only this ground, these trenches, and the decision to die here, if necessary. On March 2nd, Mussolini arrives in Albania. Italian radio announces that Il Duce himself will lead the spring offensive. Mussolini tours Italian divisions. He gives speeches. He promises victory. He tells his soldiers that they will redeem Italian honor, that they will prove themselves equal to the Germans. Mussolini sends letters to prominent fascist families, urging them to ensure their sons join the units assaulting Hill 731. He wants the Italian elite to share in the glory of this victory, because it will be a victory. The mathematics guarantee it. 100,000 shells, 11 divisions, hundreds of aircraft, against 800 Greeks on a hill. On March 8th, Italian artillery units move into position. Greek observers watch through field glasses as gun after gun is wheeled forward, sighted, and camouflaged. They count battery positions until they lose count. That night, Kaslas's men try to sleep in their trenches. Some write letters home. Some pray. Most simply wait, knowing that morning will bring hell. At 3 a.m. on March 9th, 1941, the Italian artillery opens fire. The bombardment begins in darkness. The first shells scream overhead and detonate on the forward slope of Hill 731. Then more shells, then hundreds of shells, then a continuous roar of impacts that blends into a single sustained thunder. Kaslas's men crouch in their trenches and bunkers. They have dug as deep as the rocky soil allows. They have reinforced their positions with logs and sandbags. But nothing can truly protect against this volume of fire. The concussive force is overwhelming. Each impact sends shock waves through the ground. Earth and rocks fly into the air. Trees shatter. The air fills with smoke and dust so thick that visibility drops to meters. Kaslas crouches in his command bunker on the reverse slope. He has no way to communicate with forward positions during the bombardment. Radio communication is impossible over the noise. Runners cannot move through the barrage. All he can do is wait and hope his men survive. The bombardment continues for 2.5 hours. Over 100,000 shells impact a 6-kilometer front. On Hill 731 specifically, thousands of shells strike an area perhaps 800 meters wide and 600 meters deep. Do the mathematics. That is one shell every few square meters. That is saturation bombardment. That is firepower designed to eliminate every living thing in the target area. At 5:30 a.m., the sun begins to rise. The Italian artillery shifts its fire to the Greek rear areas, targeting supply routes and reserve positions. Italian forward observers watch Hill 731 through field glasses. They see a landscape transformed. Every tree is gone. The hillside is cratered. Smoke rises from 100 impact points. Nothing appears to be moving. The observers report, target neutralized. No defensive fire observed. Forward elements can advance. At 6 a.m., the Italian 38th Poli Infantry Division begins its assault. 4,000 Italian soldiers move forward from their assembly areas. They advance in waves, first the assault companies, then support elements, then reserves ready to exploit the breakthrough. They cross the valley floor unopposed. They begin climbing the slope. Officers shout encouragement. The men expect to find corpses and abandoned positions. They expect to walk onto the summit without resistance. At 400 meters from the Greek trenches, the Italians are still advancing unopposed. At 300 meters, nothing. At 200 meters, Italian officers begin to smile. The bombardment has worked. The Greeks are dead or have fled. At 100 meters, the Greek machine guns open fire. 3 water-cooled Schwarzlos machine guns, positioned in camouflaged bunkers that survived the bombardment, rake the Italian assault line. The gunners have waited until the Italians are too close to retreat, too exposed to find cover. The lead Italian companies disintegrate. Men drop in clusters, officers fall. The neat assault formation collapses into chaos. Behind the machine guns, hundreds of Greek rifles open fire. Controlled volleys, aimed shots. Kaslas's men have survived the bombardment by sheltering in the deepest positions, and now they emerge like ghosts from the cratered landscape. The Italian assault falters, then breaks, then retreats. By 7 a.m., the first Italian attack has been repelled. Italian casualties: approximately 200, killed or wounded in the initial assault. Greek casualties: 12 dead from the artillery barrage, 31 wounded. On Mount Komarit, Mussolini watches through his field glasses. He sees his assault troops retreating. He turns to his staff and demands an explanation. How are the Greeks still alive? We fired 100,000 shells. How is anyone left on that hill? An Italian officer tries to explain. The Greeks dug deep positions. They took cover during the bombardment. They waited until our men were committed before firing. Mussolini's response is immediate. Fire more shells. Send more men. Take that hill. At 8 a.m., the Italian artillery resumes firing. Another hour-long bombardment. Then another assault by fresh companies of the Puli division. This time, 600 Italian soldiers attack. They advance under covering fire from Italian machine guns and mortars. They reach the Greek positions. Fighting becomes hand-to-hand. Italian soldiers reach the Greek trenches. Grenades fly. Bayonets clash. Men grapple in the mud and craters. But the Greeks hold. Kaslas has positioned reserves specifically for this scenario. Counter-attack forces that can retake any position the Italians capture. Greek soldiers charge with fixed bayonets through smoke so thick they can barely see. They scream "Era," the Greek battle cry. They hit the Italian penetration with savage intensity. By 9:30 a.m., the second Italian assault has been repelled. Kaslas walks the trenches after the battle. He counts casualties. He redistributes ammunition. He finds men covered in dirt and blood, some wounded but refusing to leave their positions. He finds one young soldier, perhaps 22 years old, sitting in a crater with his rifle across his knees, staring at nothing. Kaslas asks if he is wounded. The soldier shakes his head. Kaslas asks if he needs anything. The soldier looks up and says, "Just tell me this matters, sir. Tell me this is worth it." Kaslas crouches beside him. "Every minute we hold this hill, Greece survives another minute. That is what matters." The soldier nods. He picks up his rifle. He returns to his position. By midday on March 9th, the Italians have launched 4 assault waves. All have failed. Casualties are mounting. Italian command makes a decision. Commit the elite Blackshirt battalions, fascist volunteers, highly motivated, well-equipped. At 2 p.m., the Blackshirts of the 26th Legion attempt a flanking maneuver, attacking from the north, while Pugli Division attacks from the west, trying to split Greek defensive fire. It fails. Greek artillery, which the Italian bombardment did not neutralize, opens fire on the Blackshirt column. The attack disintegrates before reaching the Greek lines. By sunset on March 9th, the Italians have attacked Hill 7,317 times. All 7 attacks have failed. Italian casualties for the day: approximately 800 killed or wounded. Greek casualties: 62 dead, 140 wounded. Kaslas's battalion strength is diminishing, but the hill has not fallen. That night, Italian artillery fires harassment bombardments. Every hour, a barrage of shells crashes onto Greek positions. The goal is to prevent rest, to break morale, to wear down defenders psychologically. Kaslas's men endure. They cannot sleep. They cannot cook food. They cannot treat their wounded properly. They simply crouch in their positions and survive each bombardment. March 10th begins with another massive artillery barrage, then another assault, and another. The pattern repeats: bombardment, assault, Greek defensive fire, Italian retreat, Greek counterattack to retake any lost positions. By March 12th, Kaslas's battalion is severely depleted. Of the original 600 to 800 men, fewer than 400 remain combat-capable. Greek command recognizes the crisis. Reinforcements arrive. The entire 19th Regiment of the 4th Division. Fresh troops, full ammunition loads. Hill 731 is now defended by elements of 2 battalions. Captain Panagiotis Koutridis of the 3rd 19 Battalion takes command of the northern sector. Kaslas holds the center and south. The Italian command, recognizing that Pugli Division is exhausted, withdraws it and commits the 47th Bari Division, fresh troops who have not yet been bloodied. On March 19th, the Italians launch their 18th assault. This time, they bring tanks. 4 M13/40 medium tanks, the best Italian armor available. Behind the tanks, an Arditi assault unit, elite troops trained for breakthrough operations. The tanks advance up the slope. Greek riflemen fire at vision slits and tracks. One tank is disabled by artillery fire. Another hits a crater and throws a track. The third takes multiple hits and catches fire. The fourth turns around and retreats. But the Arditi infantry has reached the Greek positions. 100 elite Italian soldiers, fighting with grenades and submachine guns, break into the Greek trenches. Captain Koutridis sees his forward line collapsing. He makes an instant decision. He orders a bayonet charge. "Fix bayonets," he screams. "Forward." Greek soldiers emerge from their positions. Men with torn uniforms and blood-stained bandages. Men who should be in hospitals. Men who have been fighting for 10 days without rest. They charge directly into the Italian Arditi unit. What follows is not a battle. It is a brawl. Bayonets, rifle butts, entrenching tools, rocks, hands and teeth. The fighting lasts 1 hour and 10 minutes. When it ends, over 100 Italian Arditi lie dead in the Greek trenches. The 18th assault has been repelled. Greek casualties that day: 29 dead, 121 wounded. By March 21st, the Italian offensive is faltering across the entire front. Other Greek positions have held. Italian casualties are unsustainable. Supplies are running low. But Mussolini refuses to accept defeat. He orders continued attacks on Hill 731. Daily assaults. Constant pressure. On March 24th, the Italians launch their final assault. Artillery fires for 3 hours. Then the 51st Siena Division attacks. They reach the Greek positions. Fighting rages for 6 hours. Positions change hands multiple times. Greek and Italian dead lie mixed in the trenches, indistinguishable in the mud and smoke. By nightfall, the Greeks still hold Hill 731. That night, Italian command orders a halt to Operation Primavera. The offensive has failed. After 16 days, after 20-plus assaults, after over 100,000 shells and thousands of casualties, the Italians have not taken a single strategic objective. On March 25th, the artillery falls silent. For the first time in 16 days, the men on Hill 731 can hear birds, can hear the wind, can hear silence. Kaslas walks the position one final time. He counts his remaining men. Of the original 600 to 800 who held Hill 731 on March 9th, approximately 70 are still combat capable. The rest are dead, wounded, or so physically and mentally exhausted they cannot function. But Hill 731 remains in Greek hands. If you find this kind of forgotten history as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of courage and sacrifice deserve to be told, and by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. The failure of Operation Primavera was not just a tactical defeat. It was strategic catastrophe for Italy. Mussolini had promised Hitler that by April the Albanian front would be secured, that Greek forces would be pushed back to the border, that Germany would not need to intervene in the Balkans. Instead, in late March 1941, Greek forces still occupied one-third of Albania. Italian divisions were shattered. Morale was broken. Hitler had no choice. Germany would have to invade Greece. Operation Marita, the German invasion of Greece and Yugoslavia, was scheduled for early April, but the planning required diverting Wehrmacht divisions originally allocated for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Barbarossa had been planned for May 1941. Every aspect of the invasion was timed to the weather. German forces needed the ground to be dry for their mechanized columns. They needed to reach Moscow before winter. The Balkan diversion delayed Barbarossa by 4 to 5 weeks. German forces finally invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Instead of having 5 months before winter, they had 4 months. Wehrmacht divisions reached the outskirts of Moscow in early December 1941, just as the Russian winter hit with full force. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. German vehicles froze, supply lines collapsed, the advance stalled. Many historians argue that those missing weeks in spring cost Germany the Battle of Moscow, and losing Moscow cost Germany any chance of defeating the Soviet Union quickly. The chain of causation runs directly through Hill 731. If the Greeks had not held, if Operation Primavera had succeeded, if Germany had not needed to intervene in the Balkans, if Barbarossa had launched in May as planned, history turns on small hinges. For Italy, the consequences were immediate. Mussolini's prestige never recovered. Italian divisions in Albania suffered over 12,000 casualties during Operation Primavera. Entire units were combat ineffective. When Germany invaded Greece on April 6, 1941, Italian forces could provide minimal support. The Wehrmacht fought the Greeks largely alone, while Italian units held defensive positions in Albania. For the Greek army, the victory at Hill 731 was bittersweet. They had proven their tactical superiority over Italy. They had inflicted a humiliating defeat on a modern European army. But strategic reality was closing in. British reinforcements were inadequate. The bulk of the Greek army was still in Albania when Germany attacked from Bulgaria. The Wehrmacht, unlike the Italians, was competent, professional, overwhelming. Greece fought for 3 weeks against Germany. Then the Greek army surrendered. The government fled to Egypt. The country fell under Axis occupation. But for those 3 weeks in March 1941, on Hill 731, Greece had shown the world what determination could achieve. The hill itself bears the scars to this day. The intensive bombardment literally changed its altitude. Hill 731 is now officially listed as Hill 729, 2 meters shorter than its original height, though some accounts claim the bombardment reduced the hill by as much as 6 meters. The truth likely lies somewhere between these figures, but the physical transformation of the terrain itself stands as permanent testimony to the violence of those 16 days. Every tree was destroyed. The soil was churned to a depth of meters. Craters overlapped craters. When Italian burial details finally reached the slopes after the offensive ended, they found the ground so disturbed that bodies kept surfacing as they tried to bury the dead. An Italian lieutenant wrote in his diary, "No stone was left unturned on Hill 731. The bombs dug so deeply that we could not bury our dead properly. Each new bombardment brought more bodies to the surface. Greek and Italian memorials were later erected on the hill. For decades, they stood together, monuments to soldiers on both sides who fought with courage. In recent years, the Albanian government has restricted access to the battlefield. The memorials have been vandalized. Hill 731 is slowly being forgotten, reclaimed by forest and time. But those who know the story remember. Italian military historians call it one of the most ferocious small unit actions of World War II. Greek historians call it the modern Thermopylae, a battle where a small force held impossible ground against impossible odds. The comparison is apt. Like the Spartans at Thermopylae, the Greeks at Hill 731 knew they were likely to die. Like Leonidas, Kaslas refused to retreat. Like the 300, the defenders of 731 chose to stand. The difference is that Hill 731 did not fall. The Greeks won. Major Dimitrios Kaslas survived the Battle of Hill 731. He survived the German invasion. He survived the Axis occupation of Greece. After Germany invaded on April 6th, Kaslas and the remnants of his battalion fought delaying actions as the Greek army retreated south. When Greece surrendered, Kaslas refused to accept defeat. He joined the Greek resistance. For years, he fought as a partisan against German and Italian occupation forces. He organized ambushes. He trained guerrilla fighters. He continued the war in the mountains. But Kaslas's story does not end heroically. When Greece was liberated in 1944, the country immediately descended into civil war. Communist partisans fought royalist forces for control of the government. Kaslas, a career army officer and royalist, was on the losing side politically. When British and American forces supported the Greek government against the communists, Kaslas found himself in a complex position. He was arrested in the late 1940s. He was accused of various charges related to the Civil War. He was imprisoned. He was tortured. His rank was stripped. The man who had held Hill 731, who had stopped the Italian army, who had led 800 men through impossible battles, was treated as a criminal. He was released in 1950, but forbidden to rejoin the army. He lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity. Dimitrios Kaslas died on December 29, 1966, at the age of 65. His death was not widely reported. No state funeral, no military honors, no recognition. For nearly 20 years, his service was largely forgotten. The Greek government, dominated by Cold War politics, did not celebrate officers associated with the wartime resistance, fearing communist connections. It was not until 1985, 19 years after his death, that the Greek army officially honored Kaslas's memory. He was posthumously promoted. His name was added to military memorials. His story was taught at Greek military academies. Today, a monument stands in Trikala honoring the soldiers of the 5th Infantry Regiment who fought at Hill 731. Their names are carved into stone. Kaslas's name appears at the top, but outside Greece, few know the story. The men who held Hill 731 were mostly in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. They were farmers, shepherds, tradesmen. They left families behind. Many never returned. Of the 600 to 800 men who defended Hill 731 from March 9th through March 24th, approximately 70 survived the battle uninjured. Perhaps 200 more survived with wounds. The rest died on that hill. Their sacrifice bought Greece time, not victory. Time was all they could buy. But time matters in war. Every day of Italian delay was another day for Greece to prepare. Every Italian casualty at Hill 731 was one fewer soldier Germany could rely on later. The mathematical calculation that said Hill 731 could not be held was wrong. Not because the mathematics were flawed, but because mathematics cannot account for the decision to fight beyond the point where fighting makes sense. Kaslas's order still echoes. The enemy will only pass when we all die over our positions. And 70 men, out of 800, survived to see that promise kept. If this story of impossible courage moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm that these battles, these forgotten stands, these overlooked victories deserve to be remembered. We're dedicated to rescuing these stories from the archives. Stories of ordinary men who did extraordinary things. Stories that changed the course of wars, but have been forgotten by the nations they saved. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or country and tell us if someone in your family served in World War II. These stories connect us all. And if you watched our previous video about the Battle of Elea Calamus, that was the same Major Kaslas 4 months earlier, fighting the same Italian army. This man spent 6 months stopping Italy's invasions, first at the river, then on this hill. His entire war was a series of impossible stands. Thank you for ensuring that Major Dimitrios Kaslas and the 800 men of the 2nd 5 Battalion who held Hill 731 do not disappear into silence. They held the line when every calculation said they could not. They proved that courage is not about odds. It is about the decision to stand when standing seems impossible. They deserve to be remembered.